We're just about ready. If we can grab our seats. We're going to get started in just 1 minute. You guys ready? All set? All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. It is 4:01, and today is Wednesday, March 1st, 2023. And welcome everyone to our Menifee special meeting. And I'll call this special meeting to order at 4:01. Madam Clerk, if you would, please call roll.
Councilmember Dynas.
Here.
Councilmember Estrada.
Here.
Councilmember Sobek. Here. Mayor Pro Tem Carwin.
Here.
And Mayor Zimmerman.
I'm here, and if resident Wendy Priest would please lead us in the flag salute. Thank you, Wendy. All right, so we'll go ahead and just turn it over. I see Ms. Cornejo's here at the podium, but maybe Mr. City Manager, I don't know if you wanted to do any introductions or get us started.
No, Mayor, we're going to turn it over to Margarita right away.
All right, welcome.
Hi, good afternoon, Mayor, council members, staff, and residents. Thank you guys so much for your time this afternoon and joining us in this rainy, cloudy, then sunny, then rainy, then cloudy day again.
Snowy.
And a little bit of snow. The purpose of this special meeting is to provide the council and the public with an update on the current year's budget. This is fiscal year 22-23. Provide you an overview of where we are in the budget so far. Give recommendations for any necessary adjustments on the revenue or expenditure side, as well as provide a capital improvement program status update. The presentation that I will be providing provides an overview of these items, but it will be accompanied by a presentation by our CIP department. It gives you a little bit more detail into the CIP program. At the conclusion of the item today, there are 3 recommended actions, and that would be to accept the fiscal year 22-23 mid-year budget review and approve any additional budget revenue and appropriation recognitions as presented. Approve a resolution updating the city's authorized position listing, approving additional staffing changes, and receive and update the fiscal year 22-23 capital program. So as far as our timeline and where we are and why we are here, it's always a reminder to us that at the end of the day, as staff and as a community, we strive to build a safe and thriving and premier place to be. Our budget timeline follows a fiscal year that begins in July and concludes in June. As a nod to this year's current theme of empowering the city, the graphical representation at the top gives you where we are in the year, and we're at February, which just is a little past the halfway point. So we'll start with an overview of the adopted budget and adjusted budget through February 1st, where we started and where we are at. So when we adopted the budget on June 1st of 2022, the citywide budget was $129 million. That was $86 million represented by the general fund and quality of life fund, and $43 million from our various other special revenues like our special districts, our CFDs, CSAs, LLMDs, DIF funds, and a number others. Relative to our CIP program, which is a big component of the budget, the total adopted budget included $18.3 million, or 25 projects, of which $600,000 were funded by general fund, the quality of life, and the remaining $17 million were funded by all other special revenues. To where we are as of February 1st, there have been expenditure adjustments and revenue adjustments. That includes about $95 million of additional expenditure adjustments and 22 in revenues. With relation to that $95 million, which is a high number, 82 million of that is represented by our CIP program. For example, there were $24 million of encumbrances and contracts that were carried over from prior year into the current fiscal year, and of that, 18 million is related specifically to CIP projects that are underway. There were $75 million of carryover, as well as the use of the $600,000 that had been specifically designated to be used for the Holland Road project, and then an additional $5.8 million in new appropriations. Part of that 82 million is $30 million that is the Holland Road overpass project, which to date is the city's largest project underway. So that's why we're seeing this significant number in there. So factoring that in, where we stand today is a $225 million budget. General fund and quality of life have 117 million. The other funds have 107, bringing the 225. On the CIP end, the CIP program now stands at $100 million with 65 active projects. Our personnel started at 315.40 and is now at 316.40. With relation to the budget and its main components, it really can be broken up into the operating budget and the CIP budget. On the operating side, we pick up things like personnel, programs and services, capital outlays, and equipment. On the capital budget side, we have large capital improvements and facility improvements. On the operating side, looking at where we stand to date, here is a summary of the three main categories that make up operating budget: personnel costs, operations and maintenance, and capital outlays. For point of reference, as of February, we would be basically at 61.5% of the year completed. So personnel, for instance, is at 55.56, meaning there have been some salary savings that have been realized throughout the year. Operations and maintenance is at 18.21%, and capital outlays is at 25.07%. With operations and maintenance, it is important to note that the expenses don't necessarily follow the same percentage of the year completed, and that's because we have larger operating expenses such as our fire services and our dispatch services that are billed later in the year, but are still expected to be realized. Capital outlays, which relates to the purchase of larger things like vehicles, oftentimes takes several months to be delivered, independent of the supply shortages that we have faced for the last several years. The purchase of any vehicle is always going to take a number of years, and in the case of the medic unit that was bought, it's a more specialized equipment, so that can take well over a year, even without taking into account that we are still facing some supply shortages. This is a detailed table of general fund and quality of life as presented in the staff report with the year-to-date of adjusted budget, which mirrors the kind of detail of the summary categories just presented. It also provides a general projected fund balance for both general fund and quality of life. In particular, with quality of life, we do forecast there will be a fund balance, but understanding that we are starting efforts on our new budget cycle relatively shortly, and there are some large capital projects that will be coming down the way where there's grant funding but will require a match. The intent is to use this fund balance and provide recommendations for Council and Quality of Life Committee to consider in the upcoming budget cycle. Similar to all other funds, not general fund and quality of life, using the 61.5 point of reference of completion, personnel costs on that in the other funds stand at 43.94%. Operations and maintenance stand at 30.79%, and capital outlays at 5.29. Similar to the general fund and quality of life, the operations and maintenance and the capital outlays don't necessarily follow at the same pace because they're the delivery of the purchases themselves and just the realization of the expenses take longer than personnel to realize. our fund balance policy and where it stands. As of the last revision on September 2021, the city has established a 35% general fund balance reserve requirement, broken into 3 components. The operating stabilization reserve of 12.5, which is about 10.4 million. The economic uncertainty reserve of 12.5%, another 10.4 million, and the unassigned fund balance reserve of 8.3 million, for a total of just over 29 million. As of July 1st, the city has updated the reserves to match the requirement. Moving on to the economic outlook and revenue adjustments. So in summary, the adopted budget for all funds was $123 million. Again, $86 million on the general fund side, that's general fund and quality of life, and then $8 million in the internal service funds, and another $29 million in all other special funds, was what was adopted on June 1st. As we've progressed through the year, the current revenue side stands at $146 million, and as part of the mid-year adjustments, we are recommending adjustments up in general fund, and that's both to the general fund and quality of life, as well as in all other special revenues. Now, we do want to note that $12.5 million adjustment, there is a more detailed slide on that. A lot of it is represented with TUMF revenues to match the expenditures that we anticipate to incur this year, and therefore receive those revenues as well. On the far right side is the adjusted budget with the mid-year adjustments factored in. And to give some backdrop into why the recommendations of these are, we wanted to provide a brief overview at what the main indicators at the national, state, and regional and local level are saying. At a national level, and state and even local, things like unemployment are very well. In fact, unemployment levels are at lowest levels that you've seen since, I believe, the 60s. Current unemployment level is 3.4 at the national level. And the word that started surfacing a lot, even in last year's mid-year review, that inflation word, has continued to shadow this fiscal year, not just at the local level, but at all levels, and it's still there, but it is showing signs of stabilization. Whereas the peak of inflation was in the 9% at some point in the summer, it is now at the 7% range. The ultimate goal at the federal level is to try to keep it at 2%, but there's a lot of discussion on how realistic and how to achieve that while achieving what is referred to as a soft landing versus triggering unintentionally a recession. As it stands today, from even 6 months ago, it is slowing down, but not down to that 2%. That in turn has led the Federal Reserve to increase interest rates 7 times so far. And with an indicator that if necessary, they will continue to do that to try to rein in inflationary rates. That at the national, state, and local level has translated into an element of just general consumer confidence going down, housing permits slowing down as the cost of borrowing has gone up. So at a national level, housing permits, consumer confidence, manufacturing data, and consumer spending reflect general sentiment of a potential recessionary activity in the upcoming months. At the state level, the state does project a $22.5 billion deficit in its initial budget proposal. Now, this is starkly different than last year when there was a projection of $100 billion. What's different between a state budget and a local budget is that the state budget depends a lot on personal income tax. So, as the stock market felt the impacts, of the economy, capital gains significantly decreased in this year, and so the state saw a decrease in its revenues of $29.5 billion. Regionally, though, Riverside County continues to be strong. The labor market and business activity continue moving steadily and fully recovering from the impacts of COVID. Specifically, warehousing and transportation continue to be a driving force in bringing back employment in the region, and there is steady and continued growth in residential and commercial development. Albeit interest rates increases have impacted residential sales demand, the Inland Empire is still considered relatively one of the most affordable areas to live in Southern California. A stable housing market typically is indicated when you have about 6 months of housing inventory, and even at the current market right now, there's about 3.9 housing. That's the inventory that's available. So, yes, there has been a slowdown from a year ago. A lot of that is a consequence of the increased cost of borrowing. At the local level, specific to Menifee, we have seen an overall decreased residential activity through the first half of the current year. It is important to note, though, that in perspective to 21-22, that was a really high peak year. We almost had a surge after COVID that led to a lot of residential activity. What we're seeing in this year may be more in line with a more normalized growth, albeit with the interest rates being away, there is a slight slowdown. That said, there are still various industrial projects that are under CEQA review that are moving along, and the city expects to come to realize into actual construction. And other revenue indicators, such as sales tax and quality of life and property tax, show continued growth even over the last few months. The city continues its long-term and strategic financial and planning efforts in ensuring that we have adequate reserves and wherever possible building those up and taking care of longer-term commitments like continuing to pay our unfunded pension liability. Relative to the city of Menifee, these are our top 6 revenue sources: sales tax and quality of life, property tax, building, planning, engineering revenue, VLF, vehicle license fee revenue, and franchise fees. As you can see, 5 out of the 6 have adjustments up. It is only in the building, planning, engineering revenue where we are making adjustments down. And it is important to note we have deliberately adjusted them conservatively down to allow enough time that if there are additional interest rates that further slow things down, we are prepared for something like that. In a graphical representation, here are the top 6 revenues for the city, and you can see the trajectory of all 6 continues to grow up. Some of them, even through COVID, like quality of life, were continued as a steady up. Sales tax, we saw a slight little dip, and then continued on its way, and property tax steadily continues to move up as we add additional development, as well as there's additional appreciation in property values. In VLF, it's steadily another stream of revenue that continues to grow, and then our franchise fees. The outlier of the 2019-20 year related to franchise fees is related to the negotiations in that particular year when we received a one-time $3 million payment from Waste Management. Other revenue funds, adjustments that are being recommended in the smaller categories, we're really reflecting the year-to-date interest income that has been received. And then specific to the gas tax and other special revenue source, the big adjustment of 8.4 really relates to the corresponding carryover of TUMF-related revenues to align with previously carried over expenditures, budget, and encumbrances. So we have about $18 million worth of expenditures in the TUMF, which means we would be receiving $18 million of revenue. That's what that $8 million is aligning with. In the CFDs, the CS, infrastructure and maintenance, and CSAs, we have interest adjustments. And then in DIF, there is a $3 million adjustment up, and that's based on year-to-date actual trends. With respect to interest income, we just wanted to give you a quick snapshot of what the year-to-date income looks like across all funds, and it is just under $1 million. The peaks on October and January are representations of that is when we receive our local agency investment funds, or LAIF, and that's why you see October and January and April as larger amounts. Moving on to the other half of the equation, which is the expenditure side and any expenditure adjustments that are being recommended as part of this review. in summary, we started.
Margarita, do you prefer to have questions come during, or you want them to hold to the end?
No, we can take them
All
as we
right,
go.
Councilman Carwin has a question.
Thank you very much. I just had a quick question before we move on to the next section. The slide regarding the national, state, and local control was talking about a slight decrease in residential locally, overall decreased residential activity through the first half of the current year. Just to clarify, is that because of any kind of policy making, or is that just a market constraint?
It is just a market constraint.
So we're not standing in the way of development or anything like that.
We are
in that
not.
regard.
In fact, the city did adopt, as council knows, a development impact fee and a user fee, and factored in phasing in the changes of the development impact fee to not create any hindrances as the city developed. So this is just a consequence, honestly, of higher interest rates going up and just the general kind of nervous energy that there is in the whole country, that there may or may not be a recession coming down the line. And there is also other things like inflation is impacting construction costs. So even without the additional cost of having to borrow or it being more expensive to borrow, even if you have the money on hand, it is much more expensive to build now than it was a year ago, and so forth. So it's hard to say that it is within our control to say that our development activity could move up without interest significantly dropping back down and construction costs dropping back down as well.
Thank you.
So to the expenditure side of the equation, we started the year at $129 million, $86 million in general fund. So on the revenue side, for general fund and quality of life, we had $86 million in revenues and $86 million in expenditures for a balanced budget. On the other fund side, which is internal service funds and all other funds, we had $9 million and $33 million. The total adopted budget for the expenditure side was $129, and the revenue side was $123, and that's because there was deliberate use of fund balance for things like capital improvements and capital outlays. That's where the delta is. On the adjusted budget side and where we stand today, we get to that 225, 141, 218. And as you can see in that column, the particular line item that most grows or has grown in adjustments is all other funds, and that is again represented a lot in that they are funding sources for the capital projects that are underway. In today's mid-year review and recommendations, we have some minor appropriation requests, understanding again that we're going through a year where there is some slowdown, and we want to brace for if there is additional slowdown. We have focused these appropriations on things that are critical and necessary. And so we have recommendations of use of quality of life funds, as well as some other funds, which we will detail. Again, on your far right is the what the adjusted budget with mid-year recommendations would look like. And we'll start with the first of the requests, and this relates on the personnel side. So when we adopted the budget in June, there were 315.40 positions. As of today, there are 316.40, and that's because there was the addition of one risk management technician. As part of the mid-year personnel request, there is a request for 4 full-time positions. That's 1 school resource officer under the police department, 1 detective officer, 1 field supervisor for facilities, and 1 office specialist in economic development. To give some numbers behind each of these positions and what the request is for today, starting with the field supervisor for facilities. This would be under the Community Services Department. The anticipated cost for the balance of the year would be $43,000, and that's because it's prorated to cover basically from April through June. The request of this year's budget is zero because there are sufficient operational savings to cover that 43,000, but the cost in the next year would be approximately 145,000. It is important to note that the 23-24 estimated amounts are at the, again, high end, factoring in that it's a position that's coming in at top step with the more expensive retirement, which is not necessarily or typically the case. This is just giving you a the most costly scenario to give you a point of reference. The second position is the school resource officer related to the police department. The 22-23 costs are $180,000, and that is in the case of both officer positions because there are some significant capital outlay expenses that come with them, specifically vehicles, their cameras, and upfitting. So while it is only prorated for a certain amount of months to work through the balance of the year, there are some upfront capital costs that come with the addition of sworn personnel. The estimated cost for 23-24 would be $193,000. For the detective position, the estimated costs are $184,000, which is a little bit different than the SRO, and that's because there's a difference in the vehicles. And then the estimated 22-23 request is for $129,000, and the estimated cost for the next year would be $193,000. The fourth position that is being requested today is the addition of one office specialist under the Economic Development Department. The total cost for the balance of the year would be $27,000. There is not an additional request for additional appropriations because there are operational savings that can absorb that, but the additional cost in the future year would be about $88,000.
Margarita, I have a question from Councilmember Sobek.
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor. Going back to the school resource officer, maybe Menifee PD can answer this, or maybe you can, Margarita. Do we have two that we pay for now, and is this a third one?
This is in alignment to the MOU that is in place with Paris Union High School District. The agreement was to have two dedicated SRO positions, of which the school district would fully reimburse the city back for one of them, and the city would be responsible for the other. What we're having right now is we have a patrol officer playing or having the role of that SRO. So the patrol side is short one officer. The request for the second SRO is to have the two dedicated SROs and then have that patrol officer back. And Chief, I don't know if
And where are those, where will they be placed?
that is.
Thank you, council member. So currently the SROs are serving the Paris Unified High School District, so they're at Heritage High and Paloma Valley. What we're doing is we're also exploring the expansion of the program to look at our our additional school districts to include MUSD and Romoland.
Okay, thank you for that. So you have two high schools right now, and you have one that is a school resource officer and one's a patrol officer. Is that correct? That's
Yeah, we have two working as school resource officers. One was taken out of the patrol division to backfill that
Okay.
when we initiated that first contract.
okay. Thank you for that. And then my other question would be for economic development. So Office Specialist 2, what is an Office Specialist 2? And difference between a 1, and do you have a 1?
Thank you, council member. An office specialist 1 versus a 2 is somebody that has a little bit more experience than somebody that just started out and has no experience in an administrative role.
So in economic development department, how do you use an office specialist
So
2?
currently we have 2 paid interns right now that are splitting hours within the department, and we would be removing those positions and replacing it with a full-time office specialist.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
And to kind of summarize a little bit of what the department's expressed and the justification side of it. Relative to the field supervisor and facilities, the critical need for this is the city has increased the number of facilities. There are 4 fire stations, the PD headquarters, the PD substation, the KC Senior Center and Campus, Lazy Creek Center that has doubled in size, City Hall, the IT headquarters, the Public Works Maintenance and Operation Yard, and the fire stations and PD headquarters are facilities that run 24 hours essentially, so they require facility support 24 hours a day. With relation to the SRO position and the detective, again, the SRO, this is to complement that MOU that was put in place with Paris Union High School. At this time, the patrol officer has been assigned to that, but this would help return that patrol back to the patrol side and have the 2 dedicated SROs. On the detective side, the detective position will provide needed support to the investigations unit. And then in relation to economic development, as our economic development director explained, they provide overall administrative support for the department, and other operating expenses in the department will be reduced to accommodate this position. With relation to other adjustments in the mid-year recommendations, there is one in the operations and maintenance side, and that's in relation to the fire contract. There is an additional increase of $557,000. The recommendation is to appropriate this from quality of life funds to accommodate the increase. This increase was originally anticipated during budget development. However, the final amount was undetermined at that point in time and was not available until the labor negotiations at the state level were completed in the fall of 2023. The recommendation to fund this additional appropriation, as well as the cost of the capital or the equipment for the 2 officers, was presented to the Quality of Life Committee on February 21st, and they made a motion to present it for council's consideration today. On other funds, there are some small ones. These are the non-general fund or quality of life, and that is an additional appropriation from the IT fund balance for $48,000. That is to accommodate some capital outlays, some CCTV improvements, and card access for the Public Works Maintenance and Operation Yard, as well as some additional software licenses for staff. On the LLMD side and CFD side, we have seen our utility costs increase from the year-to-date trends, and these are adjustments to cover the balance of the year. And then there is a $50,000 appropriation request specifically from DIF Fund 513, which is the library DIF, to accommodate the annual library reimbursement costs that the city pays to the county, for a total of $210,242. Specific to quality of life, just wanted to provide an overview of what was presented on February 21st to the committee. And so we started the budget for the year at $18.12 million. At that point in time, the budget was spread between Code, Fire, and Menifee PD. Year-to-date actuals and in review, the quality of life adjustments for revenue sides are showing steady growth, and this shows our receipts through November of 2022, where we were already at 44%. On the expenditure side, our expenditures were only at 12%, and that's because we do have some large CIP projects underway. It's also important to note that during the year, we brought over the assigned fund balance of Holland Road overpass, and that there is an EMWD reimbursement of $45,000 that the Quality of Life Fund will be receiving back. So adjustments on the revenue side added an additional $1.9 million. That is an adjustment of 1.8 specifically to sales and use tax, and interest adjustments based on year-to-date actuals. On the expenditure side is where you see the $557,000 recommendation for the fire contract, and then specific to the 2 officers, the SRO and the detective, their corresponding vehicle and capital outlay costs, for a total appropriation request of $813. So the next component of it, and I will provide a quick slide, 2 slides on it because our CIP department will give you guys a more detailed overview, is in relation to the CIP program. And then I have some final slides on kind of performance metrics that we've done and give you guys the final recommended actions and invite our CIP department to give you guys their update. Conclude. So we started the year at 25 projects, 18.3. Where we stand is 65 at 100 million. Some of the most recent additions to the CIP program, as you guys will recall, is a formal conversion of the ERP as a CIP, as well as the Bank of America purchase that was approved in early February with American Rescue Funds. So while the program seems large and it is a big amount in a lot of projects, it's always important to also note the amount of activity that's happening in the back scenes. Our CIP program is a large and a very aggressive program that looks to move projects from funding to construction as quickly as possible. To give some illustration on what that looks like, we wanted to provide an overview of how the procurement activity that has happened from June 2022 through February 2023. And that is 14 sealed bids have been issued, 3 RFPs, and 22 on-call support service solicitations have been done. That averages to about 2 sealed bids a month that are being posted and put out to move to construction. Here is a breakdown of all the CIP bids that were sent out, as well as the RFPs and those support contracts. And to summarize in words and in high kind of tasks, what has been accomplished this year and kind of where we started the year, some of the ticket items that we had identified were going to be done, where they are, where we're at, where they're going. With relation to the area of new in our CIP program, there were 4 new traffic signal projects, 3 street improvement projects that are under construction. The street improvements are in design. With relation to the 6 transportation projects, 1 is in construction, that being Holland, and the 5 other are in design. The streetlight project is in design. 3 public facilities projects are under construction. On the fire side, there was the addition of an EMS specialist that has been recruited and filled. A new fire inspector in the fire marshal's office has been recruited and filled. In the PD, we had identified the school resource officer MOU with Paris Union High School District that has been executed. Menifee PD had also established an intent to set up the Menifee PD Explorers program. The Explorer Post 720 has been established with 15 members enrolled. On the recreation program side, new programs at Lazy Creek, the center expansion was completed and additional spacing has been set to add additional programming. On commercial amenities, the Newport Commercial Center was shown to start underway, and it is underway. Center Point has new tenants coming in, and there have been 3 hotels that are incoming. New places to call home, the Cimarron Ridge Master Plan Community continues to go underway, as well as Quartz Ranch Community. On the side of better enhancements to the service that we do, seeking ways to improve the way we deliver services. An intent to expand recreational programming. Since the beginning of the year, Community Services has expanded events like their cultural arts programming. There have been an addition of over 15 new class offerings. On enhancing fire services, there was an intent to increase dedicated fire personnel with the new medic unit and tenant improvements. The Fire Station 68 tenant improvements are underway and with an estimated completion date in the spring of 2023. And the new medic unit is expected to be received. On the pavement management side, 6 pavement management projects were approved, 2 are in construction and 4 are in design. For 4 parks, trails, and recreation improvement projects were identified. 1 is completed, and that's actually 3 in design. On strong community and economic synergy, the EDC specific plan was identified. This is underway as the Southern Gateway specific plan. The temporary workforce development program is active at the senior center at the library. The PEG channel efforts with an MSJC partnership, and MOU was executed and approved at the last council meeting to formalize that PEG channel partnership. On the side of increasing financial transparency, there was the focus to expand our special districts, CFDs, LLMDs, CSAs, public information, and that is underway. OpenGov transparency portal expansion, using that to provide more information is underway as well. And then we have our new ERP financial system solution selected with a solution selected and awarded at the last council meeting, and a kickoff anticipated for April of 2023. And lastly, striving for those things that we can do best. And that speaks to our strategic plan and economic development planning. So integral to the development of our year-to-year budget and our vision of where the city wants to be, a new 5-year strategic plan has been developed, with it being brought to council later tonight for formal adoption. The tourism master plan is underway, and the foreign investment strategy has been completed. To be an engaged and invested person and have engaged and invested personnel on that side, with the focus on employee retention and investment, the classification and compensation study and employee satisfaction survey are underway with an estimated completion date of June 2023. The city of Menifee, as far as a top workplace environment, has been identified as a top workplace for the 5th year in a row, and we stand strong at 316.40 FTEs. On the public safety focus and emphasis on public safety, increasing PD staffing and fire staffing, this continues underway with continued recruitment efforts. On becoming a smart and resilient city, making sure we are prepared, a disaster preparedness strategic plan is underway. IT strategic plan has been completed. And then on the long-term financial planning side, looking at future facilities, City Hall, PD, Public Works, and MOC, and financial analysis to that effort continues underway, as well as capital replacement plans, fleet, IT equipment. And then real-time financial and budget analysis underway, with a 10-year forecast model being developed in these last few months. And lastly, but not very important as well, is the community and small business support. In January of 2023, there was the official home repair assistance program that is funded with ARPA funds that was launched. The workforce development job plan was completed with the jobs blueprint, and the incubator feasibility is underway. So this concludes the overall presentation of mid-year as a short kind of snapshot of where we stand and where we're going. We still have steady growth across our main indicators, except our development ones, and we touched on why that is and why we see that way. The approach to this fiscal or this mid-year adjustment really was in trying to be prudent and also addressing the needs that are most immediately needed, but giving us the room that if interest rates continue to go up and there is a further slowdown, we don't find ourselves in too tight of a bind in that way. When it comes to our strategic planning, which is fundamental and a foundation to the development of a 12-month or 2-year budget process, is that strategic plan. We are in the 5th year of the 2018 to 2023 third strategic plan, and we are ready and eager to move on to the new strategic plan for the next 5 years. At the last council meeting, the City Executive Office provided the 2022 performance report that provides overall accomplishments done by each department, and we encourage anybody from the public who hasn't had a chance to take a look at that to get some quantifiable things, the big tasks that were accomplished so far in the year. That said, I will paraphrase the 3 recommended actions that are being recommended today following discussion, and then invite our Public Works Engineering Department to provide the CIP update. The first recommended action is to accept the fiscal year 22-23 mid-year budget review and approve the additional budget revenues and appropriation recognitions as presented. The second is to approve a resolution updating the city authorized position listing, approving additional staffing changes. And the third one is to receive an update on the fiscal year 2022-23 capital improvement program. So if there are no questions at this time and we can move forward with the presentation from Nick, I'd invite him to do the third item.
Okay, so here's what I think we should do since we have you here. Let's take some questions regarding our CIP mid-year and the authorized position listings and things like that. And then once we get all those questions answered, then we'll switch gears, go to CIP update, and then we'll come back and approve all of it, so.
Okay.
All right, so I do have a question from Councilman Carwin.
That was a spoiler alert. You said we're going to come back and approve all of it?
Well, maybe, consider.
doing?
We'll consider approving it. Right? The opportunity to approve it. Yeah, go ahead.
If Tech could pull up slide 27, I have it over here. It's the mid-year adjustment expenditures. There you go, with the 813,409. I just want to clarify: the economic development administrative assistant is a net neutral.
Yes.
So there's no additional expenditure required for that. There's going to be costs cut from the department to cover it.
Right, that is correct. There is no additional budget appropriation, no additional expenditure adjustment up for that position, as well as the facilities field supervisor, but in specific to the economic development, they are also they are reducing their operational budget to accommodate that position. I think our economic development director indicated they currently had 2 interns serving at that well, so like that would be eliminated and so forth.
What I'm thinking of is the collateral expenditures with benefits and things like that. Is that included in the neutral position, or will that result in additional expenditures in the future? Because we're not paying interns benefits and things like that.
They are offsetting overall their operational costs, interns to create it as a net neutral.
Thank you. I was wondering why that wasn't on the list. Now I understand. That was my only question.
Thank you. A question from Councilmember Estrada.
Yes, Director Gonzalez, I have a couple questions, please. And then I also have a question for possibly Deputy City Manager Nix after, about the facilities. Hey, Director Gonzalez. All right, I have a couple questions. On the interns, what type of education do they have? What type of degree? Where do they go to school?
Currently, the interns, one of them is finishing out their bachelor's program, and another one is at a community college right now.
Okay, and what is their field of study?
Public administration, and one is economic development.
Okay, and when you look for another position, what degree or education are you looking for? Are you looking for those backgrounds and those?
Sometimes it could be anybody from marketing to graphics. It could be somebody that is interested in economic development. Sometimes it can be theatrical. It could be sales, because there's an array of different talents that our department goes after and is in need of.
Okay, and would you say their work experience put together or their ambition would match an office specialist one?
Yes, I would, because a lot of times the position is something that is just out of the gate. For instance, and I have a list here, I could tell you what we would be having them do in the department, that currently we have staff that is taking, it's been inconsistent with their hours, and we need somebody that is consistently in the department. Yeah. That staff is having to make up, that is really, I would say that their scope is a lot higher, and that they're doing a lot more mundane tasks that an office specialist would be more suited for.
Okay. So would you say you're looking for more experience going for the 2 when you, in theory, already have an office specialist 1?
That would be correct. I see where you're going.
Okay. All right.
Correct. Thank you.
Thank you. That's it. You have another question? Yes, and for Deputy City Manager Nix, on slide 20, if Tech can pull that up, please. So it mentions a critical need for a field supervisor and the increased number of facilities. I noticed a lot of these facilities listed have been here for a long time. When was the last time we hired an additional field supervisor, and how many new facilities have we added since that initial hire?
Good questions, Councilmember Estrada. Actually, several years ago, we had 3 manager positions. We had a manager over fleet and facilities, a manager over parks and landscape, and then a manager over the street division. Currently, we have 2 manager positions, one in public works overseeing streets and fleet, and there's 2 supervisor positions for each of those divisions for fleet and streets. And then on the community services side, we have one manager that oversees parks, the right-of-way landscapes, and facilities, so all three of those components, but only one supervisor that is mainly focused on parks and landscapes. So we're missing a supervisor position to focus on facilities. And as mentioned, a lot of these facilities we've had for a while, but we're seeing a higher volume of needs with these facilities, especially with the fire stations aging. There's a lot of replacements, as Ms. Cornejo mentioned. These critical facilities like the police department, fire stations, they're operated 24/7, so there's a lot of heavy use on things like the HVAC systems, electrical systems, and we have to make sure those keep running for the personnel that are operating out of those. Also, Lazy Creek, as everyone knows, and as the community is enjoying, it's doubled in size. And also mentioned, we also have the new Bank of America building that we just acquired that's going to require some TLC before we can operate that. And in the facilities division, we actually only have 2 facility workers. So we do rely heavily on a lot of contracts. So a lot of HVAC, electricians, things like that. So we are recommending a supervisor position to oversee those all that contract work, and also at a field level, because that is a working supervisor, someone that would be out there with those workers, but also have the capacity, capability to schedule those contractors, oversee their work, and make sure it's done properly.
Okay, thank you. So under facilities, you have the field supervisor, and I understand there's an increase of activity with the population growth, the age, the deterioration of the facilities. Just off the top of your head, a ballpark estimate, how many new facilities have we added that supervisor is overlooking?
Well, even within this list, we have the office space right across the way that IT is occupying, the new building at Lazy Creek. Even during the time that I've been here, we have this building, which we didn't have before. We just had the city hall down the street. So now that's a police department building, plus the buildings behind that were used to be part of the ambulance service, which the police department acquired. This building, the Bank of America building, and then the Lazy Creek expansion. So quite a few facilities. And then also, as you just mentioned, the fire station's aging and doing renovations there and keeping up with those.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question, and maybe Margarita, you might be able to answer it, but a year ago or so, or during this fiscal year, we had an agreement with a developer who provided funds for us to continue their project, and I'm just curious where that money goes. Is it just absorbed into the general plan? Is it marked for a certain purpose?
It hasn't been designated to be used specifically for anything, but it has not been absorbed in the general fund specifically for that reason, so that there is some deliberation and discussion on where those funds will go. So it's not picked up for operating expenses or anything like that right now. Right now, it sits in its own kind of account by itself for the time when the discussion is to be had on what the use of that is. It is one-time money, so it's always with one-time money, it's always best to use it for one-time uses.
I agree. I was just curious where it ends up going. So it's in a restricted fund there
Correct.
to be used for that purpose only.
Right.
Got it. All right. Councilmember Sobek's got a question.
Thank you, Mayor. On the American Rescue Plan, I didn't see that reported out here.
Oh, yes, and it's in the report, American Rescue, and that is because in the mid-year, at this time, we're not making any additional recommendations, but the running balance for American Rescue Fund would be $2.5 million. It's in one of the pages of the staff report.
Yes.
But at this point in time, there is no additional recommendations for adjustments on that.
Okay, that's why I didn't see it. I did see it in the staff report and didn't see it reported out. And that, the city is just being, conservative on that, and it is for one time. We're trying to use it for one time use. Okay, but nothing right now at mid-year.
Nothing
Okay.
again. We'll factor in again when we go into the new budget cycle again as a source, cognizant that we have until 2024 to expend it. But again, it gives us that extra room for as we build our CIP program or any one-time expenses that may come up between now and then. So our approach was to minimize the expenditure request at this point in time.
Thank you.
All right, and our Assistant City Manager.
Thank you. I just wanted to add on both of those items, they're each about $2.5 million. And our plan was to look at the needs for the next fiscal year and present some options and the best use of those funds for our best recommendations for the use of those funds, both the ARPA and the other developer restricted item of $2.5 million.
Thank you very much for the updates. Council members, any other questions before we switch gears to CIP? Hearing none, I think we're ready to do so. Thank you, Margarita, and welcome, Mr. Fiddler.
Wrong way. All right, good afternoon, Honorable Mayor and council members. Margarita did such an amazing job. A lot of my information will be repeated, so let me go ahead and get started. So as Margarita had mentioned, we had about 18.3 million in this current fiscal year. These are the projects and the various project types that were approved for this fiscal year. And this just breaks down the areas of where we are spending. Obviously, there was 100.4 million carryover, and plus the 18.3 million that is current year. So as you can see, approximately $53 million is in construction, and probably the biggest chunk of that is the Holland Road overcrossing. And then we have 43.5 million in design, and then 3.6 million completed, for the total of 100.4 million. So this is the adjusted budget continued, the 100 million that breaks down each project type that were the funding sources for each project type. And then on the right hand side, you can see the top 5 projects that carry about 60%, a little over 60% of that $100 million, with Holland Road being a little over 31% of the 100 million at 31.7 million. And then followed by the Fire Station 5 at 10.2. We do have the pavement management program, which is several different projects combined together. That's not one project. There's, as Margarita mentioned, there's 4 projects in there, and same thing for the traffic signals. There are 4 traffic signals that accumulate to the 4.3 million. So this is a list of all the projects that we're working on. Margarita mentioned there's 65. This is a partial part of the list, and then kicking over to the next page, this is the remainder of that list. We have 36 of those projects in design, 18 projects in construction, 11 projects completed, for the total of 65 active projects within the capital improvement program. So I'm going to highlight some of our larger projects that we're currently working on. The New Quail Valley Fire Station number 5. This project just started. Really kicked off the ground in January, had the groundbreaking ceremony in December, but the contractor really started working in January, but has been stalled quite a bit due to weather. They have gone out there and built up their building pads. They're starting to do some of the underground, but again, with all this rain weather, it's really delayed that project really hitting the ground hard. The Central Park Amphitheater, this project is pretty much complete, the design. They're mobilizing to get it out, to place out the bid here within the next few weeks to month. Just collecting the last few comments, and then we'll, Community Services Department will put that project out to bid. The Bradley Boulevard Bridge over Salt Creek, this project is about 95% complete. We're anticipating having all the environmental documents ready for that project by the mid-year. So we anticipate going out to bid for construction July, August timeframe. Once we get secure our NEPA documents, finalize the environmental the plans and specifications, and budget for next fiscal year. The McCall Boulevard I-215 interchange, this project is in the PA and ED phase. This is one of our larger projects. Again, another multi-year project expanding the McCall Boulevard over Interstate 215, and we're approximately 25% complete with the PA and ED. And then the Holland Road overcrossing, like I mentioned before, this project had a groundbreaking ceremony in December. Project really hit the ground running in January. The contractors have been out there locating all the utilities, starting some of the underground work for that project to start taking off out of the ground. And then the Scott Road, Bundy Canyon Road widening. This is a very long multi-year project. We're currently in the design process. We're about 70% complete with that process. We did also have to step back and do a NEPA document for that project because we did receive federal funding. So we're working through that program. We anticipate completing that process of March of 2024, and then start to look for additional funding to complete this project. We're constantly putting in grant applications for this project, so it's will be shovel ready and fund ready when the time comes when we clear the environmental documents. The Garbani Road and I-215 interchange is the very initial stages of design. It's called a PID, Project Initiation Document. This is where we work with Caltrans and our consultants to identify what types of interchanges are available to this location. We have to study 5 different types of interchanges before we make a selection and run through all the different models and the traffic scenarios for that. With that project, we're about 80% complete, and then once we complete that phase, we'll move into the PA and ED, similar to what the McCall Boulevard interchange is, and you'll see an upcoming request in next fiscal year to move us to that next phase. So the Valley Boulevard road widening, this project is underway. It's probably about between 20 and 30% complete right now. We do have a basic geometry layouts. We're working with EMWD because you can see in this photo, it impacts their desalter plant on Murrieta and the extension of Valley Boulevard. So we've got some work to do through there, and then extending all the way up. And once we get our 30 to 60% complete, there's a significant amount of right-of-way to the north of the area, and then also through the EMWD's facility, so we'll have to acquire some right-of-way on those projects, on that project. The McCall Boulevard widening project, this project is about 60% complete in design. We've been working also with a developer that's on the northwest corner of McCall and Menifee to kind of coordinate some of our efforts with theirs, but basically where we're taking that road from a 2-lane facility to a 4-lane facility all the way from Antelope to Menifee. And so the Murrieta Road bridge over Salt Creek, this is a project that you saw last council meeting. We will kick off with the design consultant this month to get that project started, and moving forward it'll be a similar process as we did with Bradley Road and bridge over Salt Creek. So at least now we know what to look for as we're moving forward with this project. And with that, I'm open for questions.
All right, thank you, Mr. Fiedler. Council members, do we have any questions regarding CIP projects? I do have a couple quickies. Regarding the traffic signal projects, it seems like there's been a delay, and at one time you had told us that you were having a difficult time procuring some of the mast arms or some of the controller boxes. Can you update us on that?
Yeah, we've had a significant amount of delays on various components of the traffic signals, whether it's a traffic signal controller box, a meter pedestal, or power, or the actual poles themselves. Typically, a traffic signal pole would take between 12 and 16 weeks to get. They've been ranging from 20 to 24. Power pedestals in the past were you'd get them within 5 to 10 weeks. We've waited 4 to 5 months now for power pedestals. There's a huge backlog on every electrical piece of equipment out there, breakers, cabinets, switch gear. We're struggling with anything that has an electrical component just because of the supply and chain demand. So we borrowed equipment from the county to get a couple of the traffic signals up and operational. So we have got one of them up and running. Well, 3 of them are up and running. 2 of them are on our own electrical pedestals. 1 pedestal we borrowed from the county. Menifee and Garbani, we're still waiting. Actually, I think they just received the power pedestal for Menifee and Garbani, so we're working through that one.
Okay, good. And then On the Scott Road Bundy Canyon widening project, this is just a 30,000 foot elevation question. What do we estimate the total cost to us being on that project?
Well, that's a question for Carlos Geronimo, our our
Ballpark,
principal.
yeah.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, Mayor and council members. So we're looking at around $35 to $36 million in today's dollars. So that depends on what happens later on with inflation.
That
and costs.
includes right-of-way
That includes
acquisition?
design, right away acquisition, and all the way to construction administration, all the way to close out.
That's not that bad. I thought that was gonna be, 50 plus, so,
Just hoping not.
yeah, yeah. All right, thank you.
He did say today's dollars.
Today's dollars, yeah. Council members, any other questions for CIP?
Well, it just sounds like to me we need to get help to our economic development department so we can get some more sales tax dollars brought into the city so we can get the money for these projects.
Yeah.
So it's
Well,
a team
our
effort.
staff has been doing an amazing job of reaching out and doing grant applications for all these projects. So we are always looking for additional dollars for these types of projects.
Just if I can just add, we're talking about this on a different project, but we're getting ready to break ground on a new elementary school that's not too far from that widening project. So safe routes to schools might be a contributing factor that we didn't have when we started this project. Have we explored that option?
You're talking about the Menifee School number 15?
Right.
Yeah. We have been working directly with the school district to ensure that they have adequate sidewalks to that school district. That's quite far away from the Scott Road Bundy Canyon projects, is quite a ways away from the school itself. But we do. We look for every opportunity for safe routes to school. We partner with the school districts. We ask them, where their needs are. We obviously know where our needs are for those types of projects. So we try to get letters of support from the school districts because it just makes our application that much more sound. So yeah, we definitely look towards that.
One of the CIP projects that we talked about last year was sort of a pilot thing to install some solar-powered LED street lights in the Quail Valley area. Have we had any progress on that, or are we looking at some options?
Yeah, we have. We've located all the solar street light locations. We worked with a couple of different vendors to get technical specs for the street lights. We also received some quotes from them just to give us a ballpark estimate. Some of the quotes are a little bit higher than what we had anticipated because they said it's such rocky soil out there to go out there and do the foundations for the poles. So we're looking at, we do have that. It's getting very close to being completed in design, and then we'll put it out to bid. And we've got all the specs together from the consultants that we're looking to, not the vendors that would like to see out there in the projects. So we are getting close. One of the other things that we are working towards is there is also an energy grant that has about $146,000 that's slated towards the city of Menifee, that one of those types of projects is eligible. So we're looking to see how we can leverage some of our funds to capture more.
That'd be great. I'm very curious and hopeful that we can find a product that works well and lasts. There's other locations where something like that would be great. Some of our parks have some dark spots that aren't energized and be difficult to bring power to, but there's existing poles and things that are there. So something like just screwing in a solar powered light would work. Also, there's some neighborhoods where they've talked about thefts at mailbox clusters and things like that that could use some lighting. So I'm hoping that we can find a good product that might work well in some other places. So.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, and you brought up a good point, because that was one of the areas that we were looking for in Quail Valley of the mailbox cluster areas, to make sure we put lighting in those in those areas.
It'd be a quick way to do it, but
Yeah.
we just got to make sure we're buying the right product. All right,
Yeah.
Councilmember Sobek?
Yes, to be serious, we know that supply has been an issue, and we also know that costs went way up right after the pandemic. Have we seen anything in the costs come down yet?
So the only one that I've really seen a cost come down is in lumber. But that's more in their sheeting, lumber sheeting, not more of the timber itself. So like OSB was what they use like on roofing and shear walls. That went from, at the peak, it was somewhere around $80 a sheet. It is now $13. But prior to the pandemic, it was about $9 a sheet. So you are seeing some areas come down, but anything electrical is still skyrocket.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. City Manager?
Thank you, Mayor and council members. As you can see, we have a pretty robust CIP, and we talked to our Public Works Director about the types of things that we can do to speed up and streamline some of these projects, and they are working on providing to us some options. I think they have like a four-prong approach to be able to speed up some of the project delivery. I know we see these projects on an agenda, and then 18 months later, we're still talking about them. So we're trying to create ways to streamline, deliver projects faster. There's about 4 or 5 things that we're going to be bringing back to the council for council consideration to allow us to probably work faster on his end. There's a lot of procurement requirements that are really are setbacks and delays. And also, you know, we seen the sheer number of projects increase. So we're going to be looking at next budget cycle to see if we can give Carlos's team and Nick a little more relief on assistance on that. Because keep in mind, we have a $500 million CIP program, and we'll have probably work for the next 5 to 6 years. So we need to start beefing up that. Thank you.
Great.
Yeah, as Armando has mentioned, we can, you know, if we changed our procurement methods, we can deliver some of our smaller projects a lot faster. Obviously, the larger projects, it takes time because there's a lot of environmental, regulatory, and design oversight. We're working with Caltrans or some of the FCD, whatever, those different agencies. But the smaller projects, if we can modify our procurement methods, we can start working on projects, you know, July 1st.
Well, let us help you with that. So if we need to have a resolution come to the council to approve giving authorization for some of those things, or a pre-qualified list of consultants or whatever it is, bring it to us, because we want to help you make these projects streamlined. So
Yeah, that would be great.
yeah, good. All right, council members, any other questions or thoughts on CIP? All right, hearing none, thank you, Mr. Fiddler. We appreciate you sharing. I don't know if, Margarita, you want to come back, or you want to just pull up that last slide of what we're going to be taking action on?
Yes. If I can get the PowerPoint back up, or I can read them to you guys. Okay, I'll read them. So there are 3 recommended actions that are being presented for council today. The first is to, 1, accept the fiscal year 22-23 mid-year budget review and approve the additional budget revenue and appropriation, so that's both the revenue and expenditure adjustments that are being recommended, capturing the personnel and the operating adjustments, as well as approve a resolution updating the city's authorized position listing, approving additional staffing changes. And the third is to receive an update on the fiscal year 22-23 capital improvement program, as indicated.
All right, very good. Council members, do I have a motion for that?
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
All right, Madam Clerk, do we want to do electronic votes? Yes. All right.
Are your screens available?
Mine's available, but I don't see the prompt to vote.
There's mine.
Here it comes. All right. So we have our motion and our second, right?
I didn't get to make a motion, but did my vote.
Council member, right, we're doing voice votes now, so I'm input, or movers and second. So I input that, and I have a motion by Council member Dynas and a second by Council member Sobek.
Got it. All right, and then we just,
And we just need two more votes, one more vote.
did you get yours, Ricky?
No.
I didn't get mine.
Here it comes.
It's not me.
All right, so I think we'll go ahead and just do a voice vote.
Is that a voice vote for,
Are
I
you a
mean,
yes?
is
Aye.
yours aye? Okay.
All right, so he's yes. All right, and I see that, wait a minute, it says it passed, but I don't know how the voting went, so there it goes. So that's a unanimous pass, and with that, we're at the end of our special meeting, so we will go ahead and adjourn, and it is 5:15. Thank you, everybody, for being here. We will come back at 6 o'clock for our regular city council meeting.